Etymology and historical origin of the baby name Steve. Steve is the English short form of either Stephen or Stephen. Saint Stephen is considered the very first Christian martyr in Roman Catholic tradition, so it was he who popularized the name Stephen among pious Christians for centuries thereafter. Stephen's name comes from the Greek word stephanos, meaning garland crown, because he was the first disciple of Jesus to receive the martyr's crown. His story is told in Acts 6:8-8:2. The apostles ordained 7 deacons to look after the care of widows and the poor, and of these chosen administrators, Stephen was the most famous. He was known for his eloquence and wisdom, which inspired many followers of Jesus. As a result of Stephen's successful missionaries, he attracted the notice of some very bad men. They accused Stephen of blasphemy against Moses and God in front of an assembly of men, which Stephen faced bravely. Legend has it that his face took on the formation of an angel. The men exacted the requisite ancient punishment of stoning to death. In his parting words, Stephen asked only for his enemies' salvation. "Lord, do not hold this sin against them." Acts 7 verse 60. As it turned out, Stephen's public stoning had the opposite effect the executioners had intended, because many Christ followers fled from Jerusalem to Judea and Samaria fearing for their lives, taking with them a belief system that had previously been confined to Jerusalem. As the first Christian martyr, Stephen's feast day comes right after Jesus on December 26. Like many names from the Bible, Stephen gained popularity in ancient times and on throughout the Middle Ages as people bestowed names upon their children in homage to those they revered. In more modern times, the English short form of Steve was adopted as an independently given name in its own right. Personality of the boy named Steve. The number 8 personality has everything to do with power, wealth, and abundance. Somehow, this personality has been blessed on the material plane, but their authoritative and problem-solving traits provide evidence that their good fortunes are not just the luck of the lottery. They are well-earned. This is the personality of CEOs and high-ranking military personnel. 8s are intensely active, hard-driving individuals. Success is only meaningful to them after a job well done. They are remarkable in their ability to see the larger picture right down to the smallest details, and organize a strategy around success. They then have the ability to direct a group around them toward any goal, and realize individual potential to get the most out of their team. Popularity of the boy named Steve. Steve is another example of a truncated name that has enjoyed a long tradition as an independently given name in its own right. Certainly not as popular as either Stephen or Stephen, Steve has still managed to ride the charts by himself and independent of his big brothers. Steve was consistently a top 200 favorite boys' name in the country, and finally in 1943 he made the top 100. Steve stayed on the top 100 list for over 25 years, before slipping off in 1970. The height of this name's usage came during the late 1950s and early 60s when Steve managed to maintain a spot on the top 50 list of most commonly used masculine names in the United States. As a short form of the more formal Stephen or Stephen, this was a pretty impressive showing. Still, when we researched all the well-known Steves, Jobs, McQueen, Nash, Irwin, etc., all of them were born with the full names of either Stephen or Stephen rather than just plain old Steve. Which makes sense, then your kid has the option of being called Steve or not. Stephen is currently the most widely used spelling, and Stephen is now the second most preferred form of the name. Even the Spanish Esteban is higher up on the charts than Steve. We get the attraction for this name, though. The one-syllable Steve has a much stronger and more masculine sound when compared to the genteel Stephen. Quick facts on Steve. Gender, boy. Origin, English. Number of syllables, 1. Ranking popularity, 874. Pronunciation, Steve. Simple meaning, garland crown, reward. Characteristics of Steve. Tenacious, authoritative, powerful, achiever, tough, wealthy, problem solver. Cultural references to the baby name, Steve. Popular songs on Steve. A skit by Eminem, explicit, Steve Polychronopoulos, Aloha Steve and Dano, a song by The Porkers, a song by Widespread Panic, DJ Jazzy Steve, 27 Guys Named Steve, a song by Spitfire, Steve Berman, Steve McQueen, a song by Sheryl Crow, by Small Towns Burn a Little Slower, One Arm Steve, a song by Adam Sandler, explicit. Famous people named Steve. Steven Steve Yzerman, hockey player, Stephen A. Estevia Martin, comic, actor, author, Stephen A. Estevia Howe, guitarist, Stephen Steve Largent, football player / politician, Stephen A. Estevia Miller, musician, Stephen Steve McNair, football player, Stephen A. Estevia Buscemi, actor, Stephen Steve Winwood, musician, Stephen Steve Shelley, drummer for Sonic Youth, Broderick Stephen Steve Harvey, actor, Stephen Steve Francis, basketball player, Stephen A. Estevia Wozniak, co-founder of Apple, Stephen A. Estevia Nash, basketball player, Stephen A. Estevia Jocks, musician, Stephen A. Estevia Irwin, the crocodile hunter, Stephen A. Estevia Allen, entertainer, Steve Carlton, baseball player, Stephen A. Estevia Carell, actor, Stephen A. Estevia Perry, musician, Stephen A. Estevia Jobs, co-founder of Apple, Terrence Stephen A. Estevia McQueen, actor, Stephen A. Estevia Zahn, actor, Stephen Steve Warner, country musician, Steve A. Stonia Austin, wrestler, Stephen Steve Finley, baseball player,